All right, this is like my sixth time shooting this, so we've just run into a couple technical difficulties, but today I'm basically just making a video explaining to my editors how I color grade and kind of the process that I want them to go through when they're color grading. But I think this might be helpful for some other people too, so I might put this up on YouTube. I'm not entirely sure. I'm just going to run through two clips real quick and kind of go through my exact process using the HSL secondary tab, which I think can be kind of a mystery to people. They don't know how to use it properly. And also, I'm going to be going through just kind of some basic corrections. So basically, there's a couple things you need to know. First of all, I shoot in log. Not everybody shoots in log, but we always go into our Premiere settings and we go to File, Project Settings, and go to Color and just make sure that Auto Detect Log is turned on in the color panel right here. This just converts everything into Rec 709 automatically. This is not meant to be a tutorial video on like what Rec 709 is and all that stuff. This is really just going to be kind of my process for color grading. So I'm not going to go into detail about a lot of that stuff, but I'm sure there's a plethora of YouTube videos on basically what the difference between log and Rec 709 is. If you are one of my editors and you notice that it does not automatically convert it into color like this, you need to use one of the LUTs that I've provided for you. If you're not one of my editors and you're just watching this on YouTube, your camera manufacturer should provide LUTs that will help you convert footage from log to Rec 709. Okay, so basically when I jump into a clip like this, actually, sorry, let's backtrack just a little bit here. This should be the last step that you're doing when you're editing a wedding. So, or really any project, the last step you should be doing is color grading. So everything should kind of already be assembled, but right now we're just kind of working with these two clips. So we aren't going to be going too into depth about editing other than color grading, but basically you should just know that this is your last step. You should have pieced everything together already. There should be music. There should be, you can maybe do sound effects last, but like there should be like sound. There should be, everything should already be done. And at this point, you can actually mute all your tracks and just go through clip by clip and just color grade as if you were editing a batch of photos, which is nice because you could throw on a podcast. You don't need to be like totally locked in like you do need to when you're doing a full video edit. So this is the last step. And so let's just jump into it. Basically, when we look at this image, we can already tell this is a little bit washed out. There's not enough darks. When we're working with high quality footage, something you're going to notice is that we have what's known as like really high dynamic range, where the lights and the darks, the lightest parts and the darkest parts of the image are very visible, and that's really good. But it is for flexibility. It is not for final image. So you want to make sure that you actually like bring back some of the shadows. Like these, I don't want them to be completely crushed because we're kind of going for a cinematic filmic look, and traditional film did not have true black or true white. But like if you see up in the corner here, we do not have enough shadows. So we're going to pull down the shadows here a little bit. We are going to probably bring those down just a touch more. And I actually sometimes suggest doing this before white balance, which is what I'm doing right now. But sometimes you want to do white balance first. It just kind of depends on how bad the white balance is. This image is pretty well balanced already. So yeah, we're still not quite getting enough darks, but we don't want to just pull the shadows all the way down. We want to get them pretty dark, but you still want to have some visibility there, and then maybe just bring down the blacks just a touch to really. So we're at negative 33.7 on shadows and negative 6.7 on blacks, and now we've got some nice contrast in this image, right? One other thing I really like to do is pull the whites just a little bit, and that takes the edge off the image a little bit, rounds off the highlights. And if you pull down the whites, you could always give the exposure just a teeny bit more of a bump there. And that looks pretty good as is. I don't know that we really need to make any white balance adjustments. When we're talking about white balance adjustments, we're not necessarily only looking at skin tones. Skin tones are going to be our biggest indicator for a necessity to change white balance. But the other thing you're going to look at is the whole ambiance of the room. Right now we're outdoors, so this is quite a bit simpler. But if we're in like a candlelit environment, it's important to know not to just like crank down the blues and make the whites truly white, because the whites weren't truly white in the room. It's okay to have a little bit of orange in the image and not have it be super perfect. Luckily, this is completely daylight balanced, so our whites are going to be white. You'll notice his jacket's a little blue. We're probably not going to fix that with white balance, although you could give it a touch of warmth in theory, but I think that might mess with the skin tones a little. I don't know. We'll leave it at 3.4 there. But we're not going to mess with the white balance too much on this image. We're just going to get the shadows to the place where we want, where there's like contrast in the image, because contrast is what makes a good image. It's having the right amount of contrast, not no contrast, but having the right amount. So this is kind of getting to a place where I like it. We're going to go ahead and just see the before and after. See, that's super washed out, and then we've added a bunch of contrast back in. So now what we're going to deal with is skin tones. And again, this is like not a very poorly lit image, so this already looks good kind of as is. But this is the process that I go through. Once I get all this to where I want it, I am going to go into the HSL secondary tab. Now, it's important that when we do this, we have our Lumetri scopes on. So if you don't have these, you're going to go to Window, Lumetri scopes, and then find a place to put them. I have it checked, so let's turn it off, see, and, well, okay, that doesn't work, but, yeah. Anyway, we're just going to pull up the Lumetri scopes, basically, and then right-click, because at first you're probably going to have all this stuff. And I like to turn all these off. You can use these other scopes, but really all I'm looking for is skin tones. If you have like a truly not balanced monitor, not color balanced monitor, it might be helpful to look at these things and make sure that your reds, greens, and blues are in the right place and they're well balanced. But most of my monitors are pretty calibrated, so I can kind of already tell my image looks decent. So the only thing I'm really looking at is the vector scope YUV. And the reason for that is they have this thing right here called the perfect skin tone line. I don't know if that's really what it's called. That's what I call it. It is the skin tones. That's what you're looking for. This line right here that goes straight down the in between red and yellow. That's telling you where people's skin tones are supposed to be. And the way that we isolate for that is using the HSL secondary tab. And we are going to go into the eyedropper tool and select skin tones. Now, sometimes this doesn't work perfectly the first time, and so you might need to actually refine it. So as we can see here, it didn't catch a whole lot of their skin, so we're going to spread this out just a little bit because it's kind of going in with a fine brush here. Let's spread this out a little. There we go. And as you can see, we are, we're getting all the skin there. And then, as you can see, it's kind of blotchy. So we're going to actually use the blur slider to kind of fill in those gaps. And then you can actually use denoise a little bit too. And then spread it out just a little bit more. The H is for hue, the S is for saturation, the L is for luminance, and that's just how you're going to kind of find where you need to be. So this is what saturation level you're at. This is what luminance level you're at. So how bright of the color that you selected. So basically we selected like the orangey red zone, and then we selected this level of saturation and this level of brightness. I don't know if that makes sense, but you'll kind of play with it and you'll understand how it works. And then what we're going to do is go back into our vector scope here and look at this. We are way in the magenta here, which I could have told you by looking at the image, but we're going to rely more on the skin tone line than our own eyes in this situation. So what we want to do, it's really simple, is just take this correction wheel right here and look at this wheel, and we're just going to kind of line them up. And so since we know we're way magenta, we're going to pull this in the opposite direction just slightly until our skin tones kind of start to fall more in that skin tone line. Now, when going from magenta to green, we want to be really careful because you could start to make people look really sick. But I mean, like, let's pull it really far, and I'll show you what I mean. Actually, that looks pretty good. So, yeah. So I guess just trust the vector scope more than your own eye. Yeah. So we pulled it to green, and everything starts to line up a little bit more. To me, that's a little oversaturated, just slightly. Right in the middle there between the center and this box line, that's usually about as saturated as you would want the skin tones. I would even bring them down just a tad using this saturation slider. And then let's blur it out just a little bit more. Okay, so now we have a really healthy zone right there. Not every image is going to look exactly like this, but as you could see before, let's reset. Let's turn this off again. Or let's turn off the correction. How do we do that? Let's just double click it. All right, super magenta there, and then Command Z, and it's just kind of in a more realistic zone. I think I forgot to mention that you need to check this color gray. You can also do color and black or white and black to like kind of find your zone. I just prefer doing this because I can actually see everything. Color black would probably be acceptable as well. Oh no, you know what? Color and gray is the best way to see it on the vector scope. You need it to be color and gray, sorry. And then when you turn it off, you go back to seeing everything in color, so your vector scope is kind of all over the place. It's not just focused on the skin tones. All right. Let's go down to here. Okay, so this image is looking pretty good. At this point, I might just add like a little bit of contrast into it. And let's go ahead and see the before and after of the entire Lumetri effect. That is before, and that is after I am done tweaking it. So this is a really good example of something I would do. Something else to note, though, sometimes you're going to want to use that HSL secondary twice. This might not be a great example of where I would use it twice, but let's go ahead and just do that anyway. One thing I like to do personally is make my greens kind of dark and lush, like this plant back here. I don't really like a lot of yellowy greens, and so I might want to use the HSL secondary twice. But in this case, let's change the red on that rose to something. This isn't something I would do. Don't change the reds on the roses, but let's just show you an example of where you could do it twice. So let's go back through this image exactly how we did earlier. We're going to go basic correction. He has a black jacket on, so obviously that should be a little bit darker. Bring down the whites, bring up the exposure just slightly, bring down the contrast, maybe just a little bit. That looks pretty good to me. It looks like it could use just a touch on the cooler side. We're looking pretty good. He's got a lot of red in his skin. So we might want to go into HSL secondary and make some adjustments to that. And again, if you wanted to just affect the reds, you could actually get more precise here, which is actually what we're going to do. Just the reds in his skin. Sorry, not the rose. So we're going to take the red and probably just bring the saturation down on that, right? So let's see what that looks like. Bring it down even more. So we're going to take a little bit of that blush out of his face. That's starting to look really nice. Okay. So I think his skin tones are looking good there. But now let's say we already did that, right? We fixed the skin tones. Everything's looking good. Well, we fixed the blush in his face, but let's actually fix the skin tones and then we'll change the rose. So, or let's check the skin tones. Sorry, let's check the skin tones for the skin line. I can already tell you, like on this one, they're pretty solid. But let's go. We're gonna add Lumetri color, right? And then we're gonna rename this to skin tones. Check. And then we're gonna go boom, and we're gonna cast with a wider net here. Okay. Throw a little blur on there. And then we're going to look, and we're a little bit too magenta, just barely. Honestly, this isn't something I would probably actually even bother making the adjustment to because we got a pretty good skin tone line right there, but we'll bump it green just a teensy bit. Okay, so that looks pretty good, right? Yep. And now let's say I don't like how much this rose is popping. Again, not something I would probably actually do, but let's say I wanted to do that. Now I would add a third Lumetri color effect. I would rename it Rose. And what I would do is grab the rose and find that. There we go. Because it's actually more of a purpley red there. And then we blur that out. Let's see what we got. Okay. So now we could take down the saturation on that rose as well. Now this is something that is kind of, you know, a ridiculous thing to do, but as you can see, we were able to kind of precisely do each color adjustment the way that we wanted. So that was more of an example of something you could do, not something you should do. But that is what you would do if you were trying to make several color adjustment layers. And then we go back through, and I'd probably bump the shadows down just a tad bit more. And there you have it. That's kind of the process I go through on each clip when I'm color grading. And then at the end of the color grading process, I do 2 adjustment layers. One is going to be for my creative LUT that is going to actually be what like I want my final image to look like is in terms of like the entire film. And then the second adjustment layer that's on top of that is going to be what's called Film Convert, which is a software that I use to add responsive film grain to all my footage. So that's kind of the process for how I color grade and how I use the HSL secondary tab. I hope this was helpful. If you're watching this on YouTube and if you're one of my editors, please just let me know if you have any questions for how we use these tools and like when to use these tools. But essentially what you need to know is just we're trying to bring back contrast into the image while not completely crushing the blacks or the whites. And then we are trying to get our skin tones to a place where they are on that perfect skin line and the white balance of the entire image is appropriate. Not perfect, but appropriate for the scene. So that's basically all you need to know. All right, cool. Bye.